Hello, you beautiful degenerates, and welcome to the Links and Locks Golf Betting Podcast, the golf betting podcast for the Action Network, presented by Bet365. This week, we'll be previewing the Genesis Scottish Open as we make the trip across the pond over to North Berwick, Scotland, to the Renaissance Club, not Renaissance, Renaissance Club for the Scottish Open. This is the second consecutive year the PGA Tour and DP World Tour have co-sanctioned the event. Previously, a lot of PGA Tour players just went and played in the event anyways. And now, because the PGA Tour owns or partners with the DP World Tour, they have co-sanctioned the event for the second consecutive year. It is not a designated event, but it is a big-time field comprised of big names such as Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy. So we're really excited. Even Thomas Dietrich's in the field. So what more could you ask for? We're excited for this tournament. Great to have our full crew along with Spencer Aguiar and Nick Bretwish. I'm Roberto Arguello. And guys, after Spencer hit on Sepp Straka last week outright, 60-1 on the John Deere Classic, I believe it was 60-1. Let's look to keep it rolling this week. But before we get into our outright card, let's jump into our best bets. And Spencer, you got honors on the tee.
I'll say this too. Best bet one for me last week of Eric Cole over Ben On. So feel a little heater coming on right now. I don't have a head-to-head wager to go back to this week. I think that kind of shows my lack of intrigue on this board, and we can talk about why that is a little bit later. I'm going to take Keith Mitchell, 66th or better. It's minus 120 over on Bet365.
All right, so you bet him outright last week, but you've got a placement bet on him this week. Nick, what's your best bet this week? And do we have a wild hammer kid across the pond?
Yeah, you mentioned a name that has disappointed this show more than once. I'm going to go back to probably our biggest disappointment of the year. I'm going with Alex Noren, top 40, plus 150.
All right, Alex Noren, plus 150. I've actually got the same best bet as one of you two, but I'm going to save that one for later. So I've got two that I really like. So I'm going to go with Alex Smalley, 52nd or better at minus 120 on Bet365. But before we jump into mine, Spencer, break down why you're loving Keith Mitchell's chances of finishing 62nd or better this week.
I kind of secretly think that Keith Mitchell is statistically set up to be a link style specialist. He ranked first in my model for weighted total driving for the course, 17th in projected strokes gained total and win. And then the biggest connection here inside of my model was that he landed 21st place when we look into expected strokes gained at similar tracks. I haven't historically had a great run, Roberto, over the last couple of weeks of these, if you want to call them make the cut sort of finishing position wagers. Had KH Lee last week. That one didn't come to fruition and end up profitable. But I think this is a completely different wager here, just because a lot of those golfers that we had been talking about had these massive ceilings and these really low floors. Mitchell actually took the opposite approach in my model, where he had a better floor than he did his upside in my sheet. He was 23rd for me overall in safety. That's just a massive gap that I'm going to try to take advantage of on a golfer that does have the profile to find success that probably does exceed only a made cut. Like, if you want to view this as a top 40 at around that plus 200 range, I think that's certainly something else that you can consider here. I am also going to touch later on Nick's best bet, because I also have that wager. And I think Nick and I have proven ourselves to be the leaders of the Alex Noren fan club. I have now become the leader of the Thomas Dietrich fan club, which I think, Roberto, you are the co-president with me there. But there are some really intriguing bets to talk about in these placement markets, I thought.
Sorry, I misspoke. It's actually, you're looking at Keith Mitchell 66th or better, correct?
Correct.
That one is one of my two best bets. I'll jump into why I bet that later, but for all the reasons you mentioned, I love it. Nick, break down why you like Alex Noren for top 40 this week.
So my numbers had Noren at plus 110, so I'm getting 40 points of value on that top 40 ticket. Seems like the market overall loves Alex Noren, which is very shocking to say the least, but he's a favorite in almost every matchup that I saw in any book that I could find. I love the ball striking right now. It's something that we haven't seen in a long time for him, but he is trending in the right direction. He did have 3 top 30 ball striking rounds at the Rocket Mortgage Classic. He was one of the best ball strikers that opening round of the U.S. Open. His putter let him down at the U.S. Open. That is something that usually never happens with Alex Noren. Did finish top 30 here last year and has won this event at a different course back in, I believe, 2016, the Scottish Open there. So I like him overseas, and I like the price. So I will take the number grab at plus 150 on Alex Noren. Keep those iron hot, kid.
All right. And for my best bet, I've got Alex Smalley 52nd or better. Spencer, I know you had him outright last week, and I know that you've been betting him for a while now because you love the approach play, and his form is immaculate right now. He's gained strokes on approach in all of his last 8 tournaments, each of his last 8 tournaments, I should say. And he's finished 47th or better in 7 of those 8 tournaments as well. And not only has he been positive on strokes gained approach, he's really been surging the last 3 tournaments where he's gained at least 6 strokes on approach for the week in each of his last 3 tournaments. So really strong approach play form. He finished in a tie for 10th here in his first appearance at the Renaissance Club. I think he's just got really strong form. And as we mentioned, this is a co-sanctioned event. So the field isn't as strong in the bottom half, I would say, as normal on the PGA Tour, at least for a designated event, I'll say. And his immaculate approach play just gives him such a high floor. The putting isn't something that I can necessarily bank on, but for 52nd or better, I don't necessarily need it here. But I've got another play on Alex Smalley later on, so stay tuned for that. But first, let's get into our course preview and then our outright picks for the Genesis Scottish Open. Spencer, I'll let you take the course preview and start us off.
I wanted to avoid getting too carried away with this event since there were certain statistical metrics that I wasn't comfortable using without the prior use of shot link data at the course. In my opinion, there's no point in guessing past numerical answers. That just ends up being a dangerous game to play that essentially translates to forcing action for the sake of releasing content. I don't do that. None of us do that on this show. And it's not something that I wanted to start doing for this hybrid event. So for me, the optimal path essentially came down to 2 questions if I wanted to proceed in some capacity. And obviously I'm giving wagers here on the show. So I figured out an answer that I felt comfortable with. But 1, how could I run a model I felt comfortable with for the week? And then 2, did my numbers find issues with the lack of information that I had on nearly half the field? And this is something that Nick does a lot better than I do in his model. He pulls from the DP World Tour. Like we've said it a million times, and like Nick and I said it on shows. I think Nick was the originator of Tom Kim. He was the originator of Chan Kim. He was the originator of Kate Lee, which is a PGA Tour answer there. But there's a lot of names that, there's a lot of names that Nick has been able to find over the course of time. And some of those have been DP World Tour sort of answers that my model is just necessarily not in tune with. And I'm okay with the building the model aspect of it because I can build this as a generic link style model that pretty much any problem that arises, I'll just look at past iterations on link style courses. Like you have these wide open greens and a slow fescue surface that's going to accentuate scrambling and 3-putt avoidance. That also created a straightforward blueprint that could be easily followed and built. Now, the second issue of the question that I talked about is not so simple when we talk about the lack of information that I have. Like, it's never a good thing when a large number of DP World Tour players are, I don't want to say getting wiped away from my sheet for their likelihood of finding success, but they're very much so getting pushed down the board. And in fairness, we probably don't get a winner from one of those names, but it decreased some of the other markets since my numbers didn't give them a chance in any sector. So that's going to affect the placement bets. It's going to affect any of those head-to-head matchups. It's worse for the placement bets just because the whole market kind of is working together there with it, where head-to-heads are player versus player. But it's one of the reasons why I'm going to have a lower exposure card than usual. I'm more or less treating this as a pick your poison situation where I will cautiously trust the larger edges that I had while ignoring almost anything else. I do like how I built my numbers with more substantial weights on putting, scrambling, 3-putt avoidance, bogey avoidance, any of those numbers to kind of try to find golfers that are going to get away from creating errors there. But it's a double-edged sword when you consider that this course's real defense and playability always comes down to the weather. So a really hard statistical metric to quantify. And we were even talking about this before we came on air. you really need to wait as long as you possibly can. And maybe that's more of a DFS answer on some of these things, because numbers are going to move. And if you want to get the best of the price, we can't sit here all day trying to wait for the optimal path of what these players are going to do. And it's Europe and it's Scotland. Like, weather changes just like that with a snap of your fingers. So I'm going to trust some of my data. I do have wind built into my model that's going to help on some of the back end equations here, but this is a really challenging course that I guess the most simplistic answer for me to give is it takes me out of my comfort zone. And if Nick would like to add to it of how he built it in his model, because he probably has better answers on the DP World Tour players, I'd love for him to chime in with anything he has going on.
No, not a whole lot to add there. Just overall, I did weigh around the green a little bit heavier than I usually would, just based off of what we saw last year and how tough scoring is going to be. These greens are very hard to hit in regulation. But other than that, no, it's not very penal off the tee, which led me a little more towards Noren because we know how that goes. But yeah, strokes gained putting too, a little bit higher, but these greens are going to be like damn near Velcro slow. So I don't know if I really buy into that. A lot of things that you read out there will say that strokes gained putting is super important. But again, I think Gary Woodland had one of the best tournaments of his life on the greens here last year. So we know of Gary Woodland with a putter. So he's not getting any strokes putting anywhere. And if he did it here, I'm not really going to weigh too heavily on putting. So yeah, I would agree with you 100%. I'm just looking for ball strikers that are in great form and let's go from there. And guys that can clean it up around the green.
Yeah, Woodland doesn't necessarily fit this answer. So it takes away some of the credence of what I'm saying here. But to me, one of the best ways to look at putting, I think looking at in particular slow surfaces is a really intriguing way to go for the first answer. But three putt avoidance, just because we do have such large greens, if I can find guys that aren't going to run into problems. And if you mix that in with some of these slower surfaces, that was my preferred way to look for putting. I did add more putting than I normally do to the mix here. I always do for European style courses and these link styled nature that we get. But I think 3-putt avoidance above anything else would probably be my answer.
I was about to ask how you weighted putting this week, so thank you for answering that. There's also 3 par 5s, 5 par 3s, 10 par 4s this week on the course. I also found that there were over 50% of approach shots hit between 125 and 200 yards last year, at least on this course. There was a lot of wind last year, so perhaps that scoring or that shot distribution on approach will be a little bit different if there's a lack of wind or uneven wind distribution throughout the round this week or the tournament this week. I also wanted to ask about how you weigh slow greens. When I just feel like it's a small sample size and it's something that is hard to really measure, given that the last time we had slow greens might not have been for a few months, and the guys who are putting well right now may not have been putting well then. Gary Woodland, putters in the dumpster right now, may not be as super relevant for how he did last year. But I do think that overall on these slow greens, it favors the players on the ends of the distribution, the elite putters and the more poor putters, and less so the average or slightly above average putters, just because people are going to miss more putts from like the 8 to 10 foot range here than you would on a normal course. At least that's what statistics have shown recently. But also, I would think that some of that is weather dependent as well.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question there, it's marginally thrown into the weighted putting that I looked at. So that's going to take putting from 5 to 10 feet. You talked about the 8 to 10 foot range there. I went from 5 to 10 feet. It's going to take in that 3-putt avoidance that I ran. It's going to take in long-term putting on any green complex. And then it's going to throw in a very small weight for me that I do look specifically at some of these slower condition greens to where if I can find an edge there, all the better. If it shifts a number a little bit here and there, and it's not going to give me necessarily massive deviations with the amount that I'm putting onto it, but it's enough for me to at least see it make a change. And then I will have it show on my sheet without a real weight attached to it as a solo statistic, just so I can then compare, okay, well, this is a golfer that sees positive trajectory for me in putting. Is that coming because of the 3-putt avoidance? Is that coming because of the slower surfaces? When I do see a golfer that has some of that positive trajectory that we're looking for on a slower surface and some of the other numbers check out elsewhere, like it's such a small, minute detail added to it, but it's something that I am taking into account on the back end of the equation that's maybe not necessarily just showing from statistical data output answer. So hopefully that answers the question there, Roberto.
Yeah, I really like weighing the 3-putt avoidance. I'd also consider looking at approach putt performance. Not necessarily something I'm going to factor in super heavily, but just something to keep in the back of your mind or look at if the 3-putt avoidance, or to figure out where the 3-putt avoidance is coming from if the numbers aren't what you want to see there.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's get into our outright card for the Genesis Scottish Open. Spencer, I'll let you start off.
So I didn't find this board to be as enticing as last week. And I mean, I guess like I hit the winners. So how much better can we get than that? But it'll probably always be this answer for these events with more prominent names in the field. We've talked about this numerous times between the three of us. It's just extremely hard to find a ton of value when most of the board gets marginally to greater than marginally priced out from consideration. I think the prime example of that inside of my model this week would be a Minwoo Lee. I really wanted to find a way to get exposure to Minwoo Lee, and then all of a sudden I see him out in the market in the 30s, and it's not the 50s that I wanted, and I can't get a price on him. And it's been a lot of that this season where there's just certain golfers that I've wanted to back. I would have loved to have backed Ricky Fowler at the Rocket Mortgage, got priced out of that one. And it's what's happening on these boards right now. So kind of have to be cognizant and aware of that. We also talked a little bit before the show started, you and I, Roberto, about there being a lot of players in this, fringe 20-1 range where there's a lot of really intriguing options that I would like to back, but we can't play everybody. Once you add one name, there's ramifications for when you've done that. I want to make sure that I've left room on my card for in-tournament ads. Last week, we saw the ability, and I mean, Straka's the prime example that he went into Sunday 50-60-1 at most books for round 4. There's an ability there to make birdies and bunches. Now here, weather can just change like that. And all of a sudden, if you can figure out the weather edge, maybe you can figure out a long shot that can steal this tournament late on Sunday. So something that I want to keep in mind. And I want to make sure that I have a card that I can do that with. I did start with Terrell Hatton at 24-1. That was inside the enhanced market on Bet365. Hatton will be an extremely trendy play because of his past background when dealing with link style venues. We see that come to fruition statistically as he ranks as one of only 8 players to grade inside the top 20 of all 6 data categories. And maybe I shouldn't have said only, like 8 is actually a lot for that number there. And part of the reason that I'm giving as many names there comes down to the 75 DP World Tour players I just don't have enough data on to feel comfortable. So the names that consistently pop for me just kept popping over and over again. Messed up some of the back end of the equation here. And that's like what I want to point out is this is the reason why I don't have a ton of exposure for some of these wagers. Like I'm going to take the massive edges I had, which I had an edge on Hatton here, but I don't necessarily want to build some portfolio where I back myself into having problems here. I just think Hatton at this point, and Jason Sobel said this when I did the gimme with him weeks ago, it's essentially along the lines that at some point with the way that Hatton is striking the ball and the way that he's producing, you almost back into a victory. He's third in my model in strokes gained total over the last 24 rounds. He's inside the top 27 in the last, however many tournaments you want to throw out into the mix here. He's just consistently producing. And to me, a really big win is coming for him at some point. We know link style venues are historically been, back-to-back winner at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship, 6 European Tour wins in his career. A lot of that European success that you can find. So if the win doesn't come here, I do think there's a likelihood that it comes next week at the Open Championship, which is why any of those numbers that are in the 30s. And I kind of would give this answer about any player I'm talking about. I would be aware that if you like them this week, you're probably going to like them again next week. And it doesn't hurt to necessarily put in a wager a little bit early if you think you had an edge for this tournament. Like, yeah, the field's going to change. You're going to get Cam Smith and Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka and all these live golfers that are going to enter the mix. But if the value is there in one spot, I want to make sure to take advantage of it if they do perform the way that I think they can. So Hatton at 24-1. I took Max Homa at 45-1. I'm just under the belief that Homa is a golfer at this point, that he's underachieved so badly in his last 3 tournaments in the more baseline, steady, short game metrics that something has to turn around at some point. I think this is a really nice spot for him. Took Tom Kim at 60-1. I don't know if I love this wager as much as I did when I initially placed it. The inflated price is noteworthy for someone who cracks the top 10 for weighted scoring and graded second for weighted proximity. But that's kind of where the high end potential stopped for me in my model. If I could get another chance at this, I don't know if I would pull it. Like, I think 60-1 is a fair number grab I've also seen this branch out further into the 70s if you want to get even a better price on it, but it's a number grab above anything else. And then I've never been one to be deterred, Roberto. Fool me once, shame on you. If I get fooled again, I guess it's shame on me at this point. But I took Thomas Dietrich 175-1 outside of the mixed cut and stronger field here than in Detroit. It's that same high-end potential that continues to ring through in my model when running numbers for Dietrich. The argument would be that the best way to play him probably lands as a placement wager. We'll get there later. I don't think I necessarily need to lose 4 units on him once again. But because of that missed cut, we have gotten an inflated price here. I'm going to go one more time swinging on Dietrich. Understand out there, if you're listening, it's 175-1 golfer, but he has the short game I'm looking for. He has the win play. He has the links pedigree going with 4 consecutive made cuts here, including back-to-back top 10 finishes. I think that Thomas Dietrich at this point, I'm going to keep betting those numbers, and it's always about value.
And last week you said Sepp Straka was the Thomas Dietrich of the week for you, and it came through. So sticking to your guns, it worked out last week, and we'll see if it works out this week. Nick, are you on the Thomas Dietrich train as well? And what else is on your outright card?
I was close to getting there. I hate my outright card right now. I did not go shorter than 40-1. Right now I started with Wyndham Clark at 40-1 on Bet365. Absolutely love the ball striking, love the short game, love what he can do off the tee. Everything about his game right now is really good. I still think, I don't know, arguably he's playing as good as Tyrrell Hatton, and Tyrrell Hatton's priced at 24-1. So, yeah, we get a little bit of a home court for Hatton and Clark going overseas, but his game has never been better. So I'll keep riding Wyndham Clark. I got Adam Scott at 60-1. I don't think I really like that number, but my numbers had it at 45-1. So I'll take those points. And then I took Lucas Herbert. I don't know what's wrong with my numbers. I had him at 55-1, which was absolutely outrageous. He is 70-1 right now on the market. It's a number grab. Spencer, what do you think about Lucas Herbert? It must be the spike in his ball striking a little bit right now, because obviously he's just a world-class putter and a bomber off the tee, and that's about it. Never really been an iron guy. But the numbers this year for his iron play look a lot better than they have in years past. So I did take Herbert. And then my last one, the bomb of the week that never pays off, but I'm going with Joost Luiten, the Netherlands native, at 400-1. I'll probably get on the Hatton ticket. I'm very close to going there. If you guys had to choose one, I think you already made this decision with your outright ticket, but just heads up, Hovland or Hatton.
I'm out on Hovland this week. So, I mean,
all
obviously I took Hatton, so my answer is going to go in that direction. And I just want to very quickly touch on the Adam Scott play. And I guess let's also talk about the Herbert play. But when we look at Adam Scott, that was kind of the direct connection with Tom Kim, where I didn't know which way I wanted to go. If I could get a chance to redo my card, might be Adam Scott for me. I don't know. It's a very close decision there. They were kind of the same golfer that, at least from a grade perspective, that I didn't know which way to go. And then on Herbert, 3-putt percentage inside the top 20, weighted scrambling inside the top 40. Kind of have to like him on a link style course. So I don't necessarily think he's going to win the event, which is the problem. But, a fringe top 40 sort of play for me. And this is coming from a model, and I know he has a lot of PGA Tour numbers that I'm pulling from, but even still, it's very infrequent that a lot of players with his skill set find success in my model when I build it, just because he has such a direct way that he needs to perform to find success, that's not necessarily where I find the value, just because, if you look at the proximity totals, they're never going to look well, and I'm always running proximity as much as I can. I did reduce it. I added more putting. I think that's where the deviation came into play, where he did boost up on my sheet. So I like him. I don't know if he's going to win. I guess that would be my back end problem of it, but I think he's an intriguing play in other ways this week.
All right. Yeah. I like the placement market, I think, for him. So again, that's the one I have not punched yet, but my numbers like him. So I was a little nervous because, again, I'd run proximity as well, but something about Lucas Herbert right now is pulling well. So I'll ride it.
I mean, Herbert has flashed on this tournament before. In 2020, 2021, keep in mind that this course, the Renaissance Club, only 15 years old, and this is the 5th tournament I believe they played at the Scottish Open, starting in 2019. Starting in 2019. So 2020, 2021, he tied for fourth in this tournament in consecutive years. Gained strokes on approach, but the putter was really where he made his money. And in all 5 of the Open Championships and Scottish Open since 2019 with data, he's been a big gainer with his putter. So he likes these slower surfaces, appears, or he likes all surfaces, but his putter has thrived on these as well. I don't know that he has that approach upside to get there to win, but last year at the Open Championship, T15 gained over 6 strokes on approach as well. So he does have that ability. I believe he won not this past year, but the year before at the Butterfield Bermuda Championship, which is also another coastal course on the PGA Tour. So I think you might be onto something Nick. But at 70-1, I have not yet punched a ticket on him, but he's somebody that I think is definitely interesting. Go ahead, Spencer.
No, I was going to say, I think when he won, if I recall correctly, and as you mentioned, it's a coastal course, I think the wind was out of control that week. I remember it being a very blustery week. And I want to ask you this, Nick, before we get off of the Herbert play. Where did he rank in your model out of curiosity?
33rd.
Yes, when I ran this for safety, he graded 33rd in my model.
Nice. All right.
He is overall for me 45th. When I ran it for upside, that's when he took the negative trajectory grade. But like, that's kind of where he's one of those prime placement candidates if you can figure out the right way to do it. And maybe he has more upside than I'm giving him credit for, because he does have those 2 top 5 finishes here in the past.
Yeah, I personally think he has more upside than he does a floor. So that's why I went with the outright ticket and not the placement market, but could be wrong there.
All right, I'll hop into my outright card. I started off with Justin Rose at 45-1. He's not the longest off the tee right now, but he's still a really elite approach player who can also spike with his putter and around the green. Also made his trip across the pond a little before a few other players. 2 weeks ago, he tied for fourth in the Betfred British Masters, and he's just been striping the ball lately. I think that he's got a chance to win each of these next 2 weeks, but I really like him here in the Leicester field because of his lack of elite off the tee play. I very much was between Wyndham Clark and Max Homa, and I think I'm going to punch a ticket on Max Homa here at 45-1 as well. It's a great buy low spot number play. He's got an elite short game, and we've seen just the overall glow up for his game. I like Max Homa a lot. I think this is the spot to buy back on him. I haven't bet on him in quite a while. I bet Alex Smalley. It's my best bet, 52nd or better. I love the approach play, and I think it gives him significant upside. So 75-1, I punched a ticket. I also bet Corey Connors at 60-1. I always like me some Victor Hovland, and I thought that Corey Connors was a discounted way to buy into that statistical profile of an elite approach player who's also really long and straight off the tee and gives me more room on the card at 60-1. I'm also playing Sahith Theegala, not a guy whom I've normally played. I think normally when I mention his name, I'm betting against him in the placement market or in the finishing positions market specifically on Bet365. But at 90-1, I love that he can spike on approach. And he's got a really strong short game. And I think that's going to play this week. It's a little bit of it's a very different type of course where you can have these wayward misses with the driver and not be as penalized as you would on a parkland golf course. Although, while this isn't a true link style golf course as much as you'll see next week at the Open, there is a lot of links golf in here, but only four holes, I believe, that are on the coast itself. I like Sahith Theegala with the ability to capitalize on his driving distance and maybe get a little bit lucky on some of his more wayward drives. I'm also on the Thomas Dietrich train. I didn't get him at 175, got him at 150. So really like him. And then finally, for my Nick Bretwish bomb play of the week, I'm going with Kevin Yu, 300-1 on Bet365. We know that he's a big hitter with significant approach upside. We mentioned in the last few podcasts as he made his third start last week after he suffered an injury at Pebble Beach way back in early February, I believe, or late January. And he tied for sixth last week. So big week for him. Let's see if he can keep it going. Not sure how he does in the more link style golf, just because we don't have much of a sample size for him being a rookie on the PGA Tour. But at 300-1, I'm willing to pay to find out. Guys, before we jump into our placement market bets coming up, I wanted to give a quick reminder that the Links and Locks podcast is proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 in bonus bets. Must be 21 or older. Offer is available in Colorado, New Jersey, Ohio, and Virginia in the U.S. Gambling problem? Call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, guys, let's get into some of our placement market bets. Spencer, we've been starting with you, so let's keep it rolling.
I thought we had a nice split if you look at these markets between Bet365 finishing position options and then these random top 40 wagers to talk about this week. I preferred placing the majority of my exposure into those two sections since I didn't have a head-to-head wager that I loved. I will start with Nick's best bet of Alex Noren top 40 at plus 150. I don't want to go overly into this answer because I think Nick did a very eloquent job of talking about why he likes Noren this week, but Noren ended up grading as one of the best top 40 values in my model because of a safety grade that bumped him into the top 20. That is not a conventional answer for a golfer that missed 7 of 9 cuts during the middle of the year. But the recent form has seen Noren make 3 or 4 weekends by turning around the one answer that Nick gave of the iron play. He has top 15 grades he's produced for win play and weighted 3-putt percentage. You add that to his links profile, which gave us too large of an increase in his price because of the perception around his game. Thought plus 150 was about 50 points too high for me. Thomas Dietrich, top 40 at plus 140. I'm not going to play this game, guys, of betting it across the board again. As I said, there's no point in losing 4+ units here. I think if we look at what he is providing, though, we have a golfer that is inflated on the odds board right now just because of what we've gotten from him recently. Like, I understand that there's been a couple poor results, but I think a very important thing that needs to be mentioned out there, and this is anybody who's gambling or betting in any capacity, you never want to overreact to 1 or 2 poor results. If the numbers are still grading well for me, I don't want to jump off a Dietrich at plus 140. It doesn't mean that the bad form is not going to continue. And maybe it does, and maybe I lose another wager, but like, it's 0.70 units for a top 40 at plus 140. It's an outright bet for 0.07 units to win, which, yeah, I went bigger. I bet it to win over 12 this week. But I mean, if you're looking at those numbers, it's still less than a unit on him if everything goes south. So it's just something interesting to keep in mind. It's not going to break the bank for me here. And then I have 2 finishing position bets. I obviously talked about Keith Mitchell, 66 or better at the minus 120. And it seems like we're all in agreement here on this last play. I just decided to go a little bit differently of how I'm going to play him. Wyndham Clark, 40th or better, minus 120 over here on Bet365. I believe we're talking about a legitimate top 15 player in the world that the market still struggles to price accordingly because of this career-changing surge he's gotten in 2023. Sometimes that answer will come crashing down when the data isn't backing up the results. But to me, it's one of those spots where the huge transformation that he's encountered with his proximity is just a completely different player than what we've gotten over the last, you want to call it 12 months or whatever it is. This is, to me, and Nick gave this example of, he said Clark and Hatton were about the same to him. Like, to me, Clark is in that same range as Ricky Fowler, Tommy Fleetwood. I guess I prefer Hatton when directly comparing, but like, he's in that range that he should be a fringe top 10 sort of player. So if books are going to price him at 40th or better in a market that's going to pay me in ties in full, which is what I love about the Bet365 board that they do have there, I'm going to take my advantage. I've seen a top 40 price on him stretched out. I mean, there's certain books out there, and we'll leave them nameless, minus 300. Like, that's a massive difference between what we're getting here with Clark at Bet365 and what you're getting other places. And then the key to the equation, we also get ties paid in full. It's just a really good wager that, in my opinion, it's probably not going to last long. And I do think Bet365 moves it before the start of the tournament.
Good.
Last week, I gave out Ches Reavie as my best bet for 58th or better on this show on Tuesday evening. And by the time it was Wednesday evening, I looked again. It was 51st or better. So there will be movement on some of these markets, and some of them are softer than other ones. Not all of them are posted at the beginning of the week. They post a couple, and then they keep adding more throughout Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So if I were you, I would absolutely check out that Bet365 market. If you bet somebody outright on Monday morning and you really feel like they have a high floor, check out that finishing position market for them, because who knows what you'll find, especially if it's in that range of somewhere from 40th to like 70th, where the placement finish is. Absolutely recommend it. And for all those reasons Spencer said, with it being ties paid in full, incredible value if you can find it there.
Roberto, let me just add one thing to that really quickly, because I think it, just to add to your point to that, Alex Smalley, which is your best bet, he opened, I think 52nd or better is a really intriguing wager. Like, if you have extra money that you are looking to get action on, that's probably a route that I would highly consider inside that finishing position market. It opened at 50th and it moved to 52nd. I would assume that before this closes, it probably moves back towards the 50 range. So you just have to stay on top of these things with the movement, but they're always changing the numbers for sure.
Nick, what else do you have in your placement market portfolio this week besides the Norn play?
All right. We're going with Gary Woodland, top 40, plus 145. And then we are going down the board again to Yost Loughton at plus 210, top 40. This guy hasn't missed a cut since February. Yes, it's just the DP World Tour. Some of these have actually pretty good fields. A lot of guys that graded very well for me, and he's playing with them. My only concerns there is his short game grades absolutely awful. But his ball striking may be second to none out of the Euros out there with the big names included. So I will go with a Yost Loughton at plus 210, riding the hot hand on a guy I have never seen golf outside of YouTube clips earlier today, making sure I like that swing, and I do. He checks the box. Let's do it, Yost.
All right. Hopefully we're toasting to Yost Loughton at the end of the week.
Nice.
In addition to Smalley, I've got Keith Mitchell, 66 or better. My other placement market bets this week, betting for at least the ones that are minus 120, betting 0.6 units to win a half unit. These two, I'm betting 1.2 to win one, just because I feel like I've got a bigger edge on these two than the other ones. And I love the Keith Mitchell 66 or better. I feel like I've been frustrated because I really like Keith Mitchell. I think he's a great guy. Love the Mizuno irons, love the visor, love everything about him. I've just been betting against him on the show all the time. Even last week, had him 35th or worse or something in that vicinity, and that hit again. But been betting against him. It's been working, but I finally found a spot where I can bet on him, and it's just because the number is right this week. I love, and I'll echo what Spencer said. I think you said you had him like 21st or 23rd as far as safety goes this week. And he has such a high floor in this field because of his driver play. He's fifth in strokes gained off the tee so far this season, and he is an elite driver off the tee in this field, maybe the best in the field outside of Rory McIlroy. He, in addition to that, has made 15 of his last 16 cuts, and for 66 or better, that's really all you're asking for this week. And his only two missed cuts came at courses that are more plotters courses where you're not going to be hitting driver every week. So I think that the course fit, like Spencer, you said, running for similar courses, he takes a jump. Completely agree with that. And then additionally, his elite off the tee play gives him such a high floor that even despite losing on approach in 8 of his last 10 events, he's finished in the top 59 all 8 of those times where he's made the cut. So he hasn't been hitting the ball well. If he does hit the ball well on approach, he could win the tournament. I don't hate the upside plays on Keith Mitchell, especially given his such poor iron play recently, but he did gain strokes on approach last week. And I like the little trajectory that he's had recently, where he's gained on approach, I believe, like 2 of his last 4 after losing very consistently on approach. And we know that his short game with his putter is really sharp as well. So I really like the floor for Keith Mitchell, 66 or better. I think I like it a little bit more than Alex Smalley bet, but I'm going to bet them both for 1.2 units. And then the other ones I have, Wyndham Clark, 40th or better. Very similar to
Let's go.
Keith Mitchell, 14 of his last 15 tournaments inside the top 40. And it's just that there's so, like Mitchell, he has so many pathways to cashing this bet. He won the US Open while losing strokes on approach. That is just absurd. If he doesn't hit the ball super well on approach, he's long off the tee and his short game can carry him. If he stripes the ball off approach and his putter's not, and the putts aren't falling, he can still catch this bet. There are just so many different ways. And even the around the green play, which of course we saw at the US Open, some really clutch up and downs down the stretch. There's just so many different options for how he can cash this bet. I love it for Wyndham Clark. I just didn't love that there wasn't as much leeway as I have with the Keith Mitchell bet at 66 versus 40th, and potential weather coming into play. but maybe I'll add to it later if I find that he's on the right side of the weather draw once that clarifies itself.
Was
Additionally,
that minus 120 on Bet365? Sorry
yes.
to cut you off there.
No,
All right.
you're good. Yes, that
I'm
is
adding
minus
the
120.
ticket. Pod play.
Let's do it. Additionally, I have two more. So Dietrich, I'm betting him for top 20 plus 375. I just want a little bit more of an upside play than the top 40. So just a little bit of a different way of betting him, but for all the reasons that you laid out, long off the tee, able to hit it. He's got a really strong short game as well and spike ability on approach. So I wanted a little bit more of the upside, a little bit more of an upside play there. And then my last one, I was really intrigued with this guy, Alexander Bjork. Admittedly, don't watch a ton of DP World Tour, but this guy has been on fire lately. He has a really interesting statistical profile where he is very short off the tee, but everything else, he's awesome. In 14 DP World starts so far in 2023, he's finished in the top 42 in all 14. And once again, this is 60-second or better that we're doing this week. And he's gained 3.6 strokes on approach in 5 of his last 7 tournaments. 7's where I cut it off because before that 7th tournament, I believe in the beginning of May, there wasn't any data for a few months. So not weighing those results before that very heavily. And in that same span of 7 tournaments, he's gained at least 2.8 strokes putting 6 out of the last 7 times. So the putting and the approach play is really strong. And that plays basically on any golf course in the world. And he's finished 9th or better in 6 of his last tournaments as well. 6 of his last 7 tournaments as well. So strong form recently, strong form throughout the bag pretty much because he's not going to magically gain 20 yards off the tee. So he's doing his thing and he's got really strong course history. He's played in the Scottish Open each of the last 4 years and has finished no worse than a tie for 62nd in 2019. But over that same span, T19, T26, T42, lost strokes gained off the tee in all 4 of them. And he would have cashed this bet all 4 times. You could argue he's coming in with the best form of his career. And at 60-second or better, I think the juice is worth the squeeze at minus 120.
Yeah, I kind of like I've talked about, I don't have a ton of information on these DP World Tour players, but one of the intriguing things that my model did pinpoint is of all the players that we're talking about, and we're running small sample sizes here, I think Bjork was not the only one. I mean, there weren't many of them that I had very limited data on that actually cracked the top 50 for me for safety. So if you're saying that, this is a bet that's inside of the 60th or better, 62nd or better range here, is that what the number was, Roberto?
Yes, correct.
It's intriguing. I don't really have the statistical numbers to back it up, but if you look at this tournament's been played at this course 4 times, 42nd, 26th, 19th, 62nd, all of those would be winners on that wager. So that's intriguing.
Also, a little fun fact, strength of the field, not the same as in his past 8 tournaments, but in his past 8 tournaments, 62 players have beaten him combined. We just need him to finish 62nd or better this week. Just make the cut. So I like all those. Guys, any other plays that you guys have on your cards before we get into our rapid fire portion?
No, like the 2 wagers that I don't currently have that I've highly considered putting at some point would be Bet365 bets. I thought Alex Smalley 52nd or better. I think you've probably talked me into it, Roberto, where I will make that play now. A lot of safety in my model for him. And then Sahith Theegala, I believe he's 50. You can, if you have it up in front of you, Roberto, I believe he's 55th or better.
I can find it very quickly.
I thought he was interesting, kind of for all the reasons that you talked about here. It's an intriguing course for him.
55th or better, minus 120.
Yeah, I thought that was like, I don't love, because I did the same thing you did, and I always bet these 0.6 to win 0.5. I bet Mitchell more of a unit in this particular situation. I think playing it 1.2 to win 1 is another realistic path that you can go. Like that's probably where I would max out these sorts of bets in this market, but that was where I got my increase. Like to me, this is almost a 2x wager from where I would normally be on Mitchell. So I don't know how many more bets I necessarily wanted to add, but Smalley would be the next one if I do make it, which I'm leaning that way. And then Theegala would have been the second one, but no, nothing else for me. I don't see any value in the head-to-head market. Seems like none of us mentioned a head-to-head play. So that's really intriguing for this tournament. I also didn't see any value for round 1 matchups from what is out there right now. Just a difficult board with some of these prices, but there's also a lot of value on the back end that like that Keith Mitchell play is one of my preferred finishing position bets that we've probably talked about on this show. It's just something that we could take an advantage of. I think of very soft pricing, and the same thing can be said about Wyndham Clark for me there.
I'll also add this on Sahith Theegala. The Sanderson Farms Championship was played and finished on October 2nd of 2022, better known as the Chicken Championship, of course. That was the last time Sahith Theegala missed a cut.
Yeah.
So you think you're making a cut, you're going to have a really good chance of cashing 55th or better and get him to the weekend with his putting abilities around the green game. He hasn't even hit the ball that well off the tee recently. I like that one. I'm going to add an in-pot play on Theegala 55th or better. Going to do that one for the 0.6 units as well.
I like it.
Fellas, you ready for the rapid fire portion?
Let's
do it.
All right. So we've made it all the way through our podcast without mentioning Scotty Scheffler's name. I don't know how he did that, but he's been on a tear. It's pretty unbelievable that he hasn't won since the Players Championship. But since the Byron Nelson, he's gone T5, T2, T3, 3, 3, and T4 most recently at the Travelers Championship. Variety of different courses. He's done it consistently by smashing it off the tee and hitting it close on approach. And around the green, he's awesome as well. What would you guys price him at, or what number would you guys need to punch a ticket on him to win outright this week?
I always give the same answer on this show. So I'm going to say, I don't think this is the fair number. I think the fair number is lower than what I'm going to give. I would still want double digits though. Like I would want 10-1. I think at 8-1 is probably more of where the accurate number is for me. There's just so much, like maybe these slow greens are what he needs to turn this around a little bit. We know the around the green game, super immaculate. The 3-putt avoidance that he brings to the table, one of the best in the field. He saw positive trajectory in my model. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier of I didn't put a ton of credence and weight into strokes gained on these slower surfaces, but it's there in my model, and it's there enough that it's going to cause some divergences between these numbers. And Scotty saw positive movement with the putter, and like he's outside the top 120 for me over the last 24 rounds. That's the negative here, but he was inside the top 40 in expected putting for this course. I don't know. Like if Scotty Scheffler finishes as the 37th ranked putter this week, I guess he just wins, right? So like, there's a lot to like. He may end up burning this board for a lot of people, which is another reason why I didn't necessarily want to get overexposed to this tournament.
I completely echo those thoughts. Additionally, and you mentioned it earlier, all the guys at the 20-1 range, Hatton, Hovland, Spieth, Fleetwood, guys I all really liked. Didn't want to choose one, especially with the weather being a factor. And I'll save my money for an in-pod or an in-tournament play. Already got the in-pod play on the Gala. Nick, what would you make proper on Scheffler?
Yeah, 10-1. Just looking at his data and everything, I think his putting at this course in 2021 was one of the third best round he's had putting ever. So, I mean, maybe Spencer's onto something. At least since that tournament in 2021, he hasn't topped it besides twice. So 10-1 is as short as I would go. I'm just not betting a single digit player at all in PGA. I don't think I'd ever do that unless it's like a Sunday live ad, maybe Saturday at most. But yeah, no, I'm just not going single digits with anybody right now.
There's just too many ramifications that come into play from a bankroll exposure standpoint that it adds up. It's really fun. And we've said this a million times, Nick. It's really fun to say that you've hit the winner, but it's not so much fun when you're taking 10 names and the majority of them are sub 30-1 and you're just throwing, I mean, they're not even darts. I mean, they're favorites, but you're throwing dart after dart after dart. And then, yeah, one hits, but you don't really profit the way that you want to. And if you go the Scotty route, it's a one-man card. Like there's really no other way around it. You can't build a card with Scotty and tons of other names unless you just want to be massively overexposed. And the three of us, I've said this before, and I still believe this to be true. Maybe I'm wrong. I think I'm the most aggressive of the three of us. And I don't even mean that as a positive note. Like, I think outright markets are a lot of times not where you want to be as aggressive with. I would say I'm the most aggressive of the three of us, and I'm not getting myself into the single digit number ever either.
I wouldn't necessarily say aggressive. I just say if somebody's 12-1, you got them priced as having a significant edge, you bet them there. I just personally, the way I go about betting outrights, I just don't like betting people at those short of numbers. And I think I've given out outright bets at under 20-1 2 or 3 times this year, and I've regretted them by Thursday night each time. So
I think just to like double down on my thought there is, for me, and maybe aggressive is the wrong word with it, because it always comes down to value, and that's the key that you just mentioned, Roberto. But the edge can be closer for me than I think it would be for the two of you guys. Like, every single situation is different, and as we move up the board, I'm going to need a bigger edge and a bigger edge and a bigger edge to make sure that I want to play the wager. But look, I mean, I'm the person that I went into the 10-1 number on Rory at the Masters, and kind of as you said, Roberto, I regretted it within 2 holes of that tournament of like, oh no, this is not, like, my whole card is already eaten up. I have no way to jump back into this tournament.
And we'll round up the Scottie Scheffler conversation by saying the only time I didn't regret the short number was, I think, like 12-ish to 1 for Scottie Scheffler, like the Hero World Challenge or something like that.
Yeah.
When he came in second.
Darn.
Yeah. Rory McIlroy, who of course has won the Open Championship in Liverpool before we go to Liverpool next week. Everybody's going to want to bet on him there. What do you guys think about him this week? What number would you need to bet him here? I'll start there.
I'll go first, Spencer. I think he's the best play on the board. Price agnostic, obviously, but I'd have to go 10-1. Same answer there. I absolutely love Rory here. I think it's a perfect spot for him. I think his game is really, really trending in the right direction. Kind of been quiet the past couple weeks since the U.S. Open. I think he comes out firing here because, like you said, all the pressure is going to be next week when he's back at Liverpool, and everybody's going to be talking about Rory. It'll probably be the favorite, if not the co-favorite. So I like him here kind of as is he a sneaky play? But again, like, I just, even with the weather and everything too with Scotland, all hell could break loose out of nowhere. No forecast could see it coming. Like, I just think it's malpractice to take anybody maybe sub 15-1. I think we had Xander here 18-1 last year. Was that correct, Spencer? Is that the number we got? I think that's the shortest I went on the board too. I think I doubled down on him Sunday, betting him live at like -110, which is stupid, but it worked out. Hao Tong Lee was in the last group, wasn't he? If I remember correctly, I feel like he was getting some love in the market on Sunday at the Scottish, and I had a monster ticket on Ju Young Kim at the time to finish top 40, and he was like 3rd or 4th. So I was like, all right, well, I'm already gonna be profitable. I'm gonna just double down more on Xander, and it worked out real well. But I think Hao Tong Lee was in the last grouping, so I was like, all right, I'm not afraid of anybody, so I just kept going in on Xander. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna get, no matter who they were, I probably wouldn't bet anybody shorter than 14-1, I guess, at this week. So disregard the 10-1 comment on Scotty, but same thing for Rory, right around there.
I'm seeing Rafa Cabrera.
That's who it was. That's who it
last
was.
Group with Xander.
That's who it was. What did he shoot, like 8 over that day?
Oh, I can look that up in a second.
Yeah, see the round 4. Yeah, some random dude we haven't heard of in years. Rafa, that's who it was.
I gotta keep scrolling to find him on this leaderboard.
It must have been worse. It was like 8 over worse, I guess.
Spencer, go ahead real quick. We'll find this.
Yeah, I will touch on this answer.
Okay.
I'll touch on this answer very quickly, and then I'll let Roberto give us his answer there. But I don't know. To me, Rory has a really high ceiling and one of the lower floors, which I don't know if you necessarily agree with, Nick, based off of the answer that you gave. That obviously means that outright bets are the most intriguing path with him. He's if the price is right, he's number 1 in my model in expected weighted strokes gained total. You're worried about the wind. He's 3rd in wind. He's 2nd in strokes gained total on hard courses if the wind does come into play. I just don't think I can get there on Rory at this point, unless we're getting like 16-1. I think at 16-1, I will pull the trigger on it. Like, I would rather have Scotty if I'm directly comparing the two. So if I'm saying, Scotty, I want at 10, I think fair on Rory's probably more in the 13, 14, 15 sort of range. If you give me a couple points above that at 16, that's where I would at least be intrigued to jump in. But and I'm jumping forward into this, if there was a player that I was going to back, and this is just me being a glutton for punishment, because I'll tell you this, Nick, I didn't have Xander. I never have Xander when he wins. I only have Xander when he loses.
I thank you for that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I like Xander this week. I just don't have a ticket on him. I think my preferred way to go is Xander, which might be way too aggressive. Kind of think there's numbers out there 25-1 at the Open next week. I don't know. I think 25-1. I think it's a perfect course fit for him. That's where I would rather get my exposure on Xander. But I don't know. I think if I was to power rank this group, I would probably rather still have Xander than Rory, which puts Xander more in that like 14-1 range for me. I'm just not going to punch the ticket because I've done that one too many times and I am down. It's eaten into the bankroll. Like I want to say of like one of the things I run, I'll give this answer very quickly so we can move on because it's an absolutely pointless discussion to have with Xander here. Besides the point where I do think he's an intriguing link style golfer for this tournament. When you look at players that I've backed historically, and this is just goes back to me betting golfers that are in this, sub 20, sub 25-1 range, it eats into the bankroll quickly. The two biggest losses that I've taken on golfers, number one, Xander, number two, John Rahm. Those are two golfers I just never seem to hit on. I'm going to go back to Xander next week, but it's kind of beside the point, I guess, for this question.
So that leads me to my next question, which Spencer will pass on you for this one. But if I gave you an 18-1 ticket on Xander Schauffele or Patrick Cantlay, Nick, the Xander Whisperer, which one would you take?
I would take Cantlay. He checks every single box for me this week, and I like Spencer. I like Xander more next week in the 20s. So give me Cantlay. I would take that ticket all day long.
Among the players priced at, let's say 60-1, the favorites at 60-1 or higher, whom would you like to bet at the same number this week, next week, if there's anybody?
Can I cheat on this answer a little bit?
Sure.
Can I give an answer that the guy is 60 next week, but he's not 60 this week?
Sure.
Yeah.
Max Homa.
Rules. Yeah, Max Homa. I like Max Homa this week.
I like Max. It's more likely that Max Homa wins this tournament just because of the lack of success that he's had in major championships. 45 this week is a really good number for him. I've seen 60s out there next week. I already have the ticket on him. I'm going to go down that direction. I guess if I was to throw somebody else out there that's at least, and I don't know what he is right now, but I'd assume for next week he has to be close. I mean, like maybe an Adam Scott. I don't know if I necessarily think he's going to win the Open, but probably him.
Let me change the wording of this question. Because like everybody's gonna have longer odds. It's shorter than 61. Among the guys who are more long shots, let's say 75-1 or longer, whom would you like at the same price this week, next week? Aside Thomas Dietrich.
I mean, I was going to say, I guess if not Thomas Dietrich, Alex Noren.
No, I don't know if I could take Alex Noren to win. Looking around that price range. Oh, man, this is tough.
There was a time, and this doesn't mean that Alex Noren is the same player. There was a time years ago where it was Noren and Fleetwood almost thought of in the same exact light with the same exact odds that they'd get all the time. And I mean, look, Fleetwood still has not won either on the PGA Tour, and those numbers have been just absolutely decimated here over the past few weeks. I would rather have Fleetwood if you could give me the same number. I'm not making that argument. I just think Noren, and I don't think he wins either. I'm not necessarily making that argument. I just think he's drifted way too far because of the perception around him.
I'll say that I take Theegala next week at 90-1.
Yeah, I like that. I like that also.
My numbers would say Herbert again, so don't trust that at all. Unless he balls out this week, then definitely trust it.
It's not necessarily it's not necessarily the same course that we're looking at from this week to next, but I do think if you build a model, you're going to get a lot of those similar answers. So if there's somebody that you like on your model in this tournament, this kind of goes back to what I was trying to say earlier. It doesn't hurt to try to jump on them early and try to find a price grab now. So I kind of the answer theoretically should go down the direction of every name that we've already talked about on the show of our particular players. Like it should be a double down on them next week, probably.
And one thing that's fun about having a major championship in the near future is that the odds at most books are open for the Open. And if somebody's making a charge up the leaderboard Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe even Sunday, you might be able to find a number in the Open Championship market that hasn't moved from beginning of this tournament. So if there's somebody whom you haven't added to your Open Championship card, whom you needed to see something from this week, and you're seeing that something, hop on it. Fellas, Ricky Fowler 17-1 this week, playing for, I believe, the first time since his Rocket Mortgage Championship win. Tyrrell Hatton 19-1. I know you guys all love him. Fleetwood's 22-1. Matt Fitzpatrick, US Open Championship from last year, RBC Canadian Open winner this year, 24-1. And Jordan Spieth, also 24-1. If I had to give you two guys among those four to bet on it, 25-1, which two would it be? And I'll start with you, Nick.
Spieth and Fitz. No further questions.
Okay. How about you?
I will say Hatton and Fleetwood.
Well, no,
I thought Hatton was not an option.
Hatton's
I thought we were
out.
saying you already. Yeah, Spencer.
So Fitz and who else?
Guy doesn't listen.
Fleetwood and
Fitz still counts. You're good there.
yeah, maybe Fitz. I think Jordan is also intriguing. I guess I'll go with Fitz though.
I would go Fowler and Spieth, but I'm not wading into those waters yet. I really like all these guys pretty much. Jumping down the board just a little bit, Justin Thomas, 45-1. Thoughts on him this week? And what's the number you would need to punch a ticket on him?
I don't trust him. It's a good number though. 45 is right where I had him at like 43, so I was actually higher on him implied probability wise than most sports books out there, but I don't trust it.
I would need larger than the number that you're going to find and larger than the number that Nick talked about. Maybe he turns it around, but like unless I see something, and I don't know if I'm necessarily going to get it. Like the problem is not only are the results bad, the numbers have turned in the wrong direction. And that's the biggest glaring problem that we have. I can live when somebody's not producing, but he's still grading well in my sheet. I can't quite stomach when the numbers have also turned south here. I think he's more of like a 75-1 golfer at this point. It doesn't mean he can't win. It's just, I would rather see him do it first before I jump back in. Like, I feel like I'm almost just dollar after dollar throwing it down the toilet trying to back him. And it kind of goes back to the point that I think we've talked about a lot on this show. If I was to take a golfer that's in that same range, I always give the same player. I'd probably rather just take Sung Jae.
Ooh, we're going to touch on Sung Jae in a moment, but so we mentioned Wyndham Clark can cash that top 40 bet that we've all got in a variety of different ways. Justin Thomas has proven that he can ruin his round with the putter around the green. He lost 3 strokes per round around the green at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, which I thought was impossible to do around there. Within those last 3 tournaments, he's lost 2 strokes per round in one tournament on putting at the US Open, around the green at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, off the tee at the US Open, off the tee and on approach at the US Open. He shot 81 there, so that's going to happen if you shoot 81. But it's all poor. Not great for Justin Thomas. I think he can figure it out. I think that if there is weather, it helps him, and the closer to even par that this tournament finishes for the winners gives him a better chance. If it turns out there's going to be 50-degree weather and 20-mile-an-hour wind and rain coming in sideways all day, I might place some kind of wager on him in some market because I think it helps him, and he's got all the shots, as Bones said when he joined his bag. Continue on in our rapid fire. Tom Kim 50-1, Sung Jae Im 55-1, Sam Burns 55-1. If I gave you a 60-1 ticket on one of those guys, who would it be?
I'll let you go first, Nick.
I think I would go Burns. I don't like any of the 3.
So I made the choice and I took Tom Kim, and now I don't necessarily love the ticket as much. I guess I would still say Kim, but Sung Jae has a really intriguing upside profile to him. And I don't know if I necessarily trust Sung Jae over 4 days. might be a better first round leader bet at 60-1 than anything else. And I'm probably just not in on Burns. So I guess like the power rank them, I'll say Tom Kim, Sung Jae, Burns, but very close with the two at the top.
So Burns is someone who intrigues me because we know he bombs it off the tee and he's a really strong putter, but just doesn't have the approach play to back it up to win. Sung Jae Im is someone who really intrigues me this week and next week because he comes in, had some really poor form for 2 weeks at the PGA and Charles Schwab, where he just forgot how to hit an iron out of nowhere. I have no idea what happened. And then since then, his approach play and form everywhere else has started to round back into form. Not quite as solid as it was from March through April, but trending right in the right direction. The question for him is, does his game fit link style courses, or is this just a small sample size issue for him where he's played one Scottish Open, missed the cut? He played in 2 Open championships in 2019 and 2022. I would have thought he played in more, but we know there wasn't one in 2020. He missed the cut in 2019 at the Open and finished in a tie for 81st last year at St. Andrews. So no finishes in the top 80 for him in 3 starts at the Scottish Open and the Open Championship. How are you guys thinking about him from a link style perspective? Because he is someone who has a traditionally strong short game and putting. Or are we just getting a small sample size here where it just didn't work out for him?
I lean more towards that second part of the answer. Like statistically, you would expect link style courses to be right up his alley. He's a great wind player. He's an immaculate total driver. He scores well on challenging courses. I don't really have an answer for why he hasn't found success in these sorts of tournaments, because this is where I would expect him. Look, I mean, there's a lot of majors that his game plays well for. And I think that's what always makes him so intriguing for me, is that the numbers work across the board at a lot of tournaments. But like statistically, I would think an Open Championship is one of the better fits for him. So look, I mean, we're talking about 3 tournaments there that we talked about. It can turn around at any point. The irons are trending in the right direction. I think that's the most encouraging thing that we can talk about right now with him. If he misses this cut and he misses the cut next week, then maybe we have a different discussion. Although like the form hasn't been exactly where we wanted to be, even though he has turned it around recently. But no, I'm never going to be, and it kind of goes back to the point I said earlier, I'm never going to let 1, 2, 3 results. If you can show me over the course of time that you either can't perform or can perform, I will take a different look into my model and we'll try to make some changes. But I don't necessarily want to find 2 or 3 occurrences and make massive moves, just because this is why we're getting an inflated price to begin with on Sung Jae. It's a combination of the form hasn't looked exactly right. Granted, the approach play and the results have turned around. And then the history at these sorts of tournaments have not been good. So if you can give me an increase there, I'll take it. And plus, this isn't like we've only had 4 occurrences. It's not like we have some highly predictive venue here. It ranks near the bottom at most tracks. You might have some of those linked style venues that are going to work if you try to roll it over, but I'm curious to hear Nick's thoughts on that.
I don't really have thoughts on it.
I'm
indifferent. If anything, I'm riding the hot hand of Spencer. So anything he says right now, I think I'm going to back.
Let's hope Sung Jae Im smacks the ball on approach really well, gets really unlucky with the weather, misses a lot of putts, misses the cut on the number, and we get a great number for him next week where we can all bet him.
I want to see the ball striking improve. It just hasn't been where it was last year, and that concerns me.
I'll get you guys out of here on this one last question. Adam Scott's 55-1, Ludwig Aberg 55-1, Corey Connors 60-1. If I gave you a 70-1 ticket on one of those 3 guys to win this week, who would you take? I'll start with you, Nick.
I'm going with Ludwig. He's the real deal, man. I mean, there's rounds he kind of disappears, but he makes up for it. His round on Sunday was fantastic. It was great to see him do that, and his short game's awesome too. Like, he is a pro. Everything about his game, I think I sign off on. And now he's going back to Europe. A little bit of motivation there. If I can get 70-1, I would absolutely jump all over that. So yeah, with conviction, give me Ludwig on that one.
If I run this from a weighted strokes gain total perspective, we get rid of anything else and we just look for who should be the best fits for this course. run through a couple names very quickly, and then we'll get out of here. Number 1, Rory McIlroy. I alluded to that previously. Number 2, Scotty Scheffler. Number 3, Xander Schauffele. Number 4, this is where the intriguing one came into play, Adam Scott. And that's kind of why I wish I had the Adam Scott ticket that I don't have. 5 would be Max Homa. 6 would be Patrick Cantlay. Kind of the names that you would expect up there outside of Adam Scott. I think Scott's a very intriguing play for this tournament. I don't have an issue with anybody who punched a ticket. I know Nick has one on him, and anybody who wants to add one and follow Nick's advice, I'm not going to talk you out of it. I think he's a good wager this week.
All right, well, that will do it for today's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Links and Locks presented by Bet365. And thanks to you, Nick and Spencer. Great to have a full pod with both of you guys around. And as a reminder, the Links and Locks podcast is proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 free. For more great golf content from our Action Network team, check out our Best Bets episode from earlier this week featuring Jason Sobel and Ben Everill as they run down their top plays for this week's tournament. Of course, Jason Sobel also is on Adam Scott this week. You can find the guys on Twitter. Nick is at Sticks Picks and Spencer is at Tee Off Sports. Nick, where can we find your work this week?
Yeah, just on Twitter at Sticks Picks. We'll have some DFS thoughts going on there. We will do one more bye week at Better Golf, but hopefully some big news coming next week there, and then everything on Action Network.
Awesome. Spencer, how about you? Where can the people find your work?
Yeah, if you haven't done so already, I did the gimme today with Jason Sobel. We talked about a lot of the plays I have here, including a bunch of plays that Jason's on. I love the Adam Scott play he has. I think he had strong conviction that if you are on the fence about it, listen to what Jason has to say. And then I will have an article out tomorrow. Don't know for what yet, because I keep saying, Roberto, can't seem to find these matchup plays from round 1 options here. And it's never a good sign if I couldn't find a pre-tournament head-to-head play. But we'll talk about more values. Maybe we'll touch it on DFS. As always, you can find my model over at Rotoballer or over at my Twitter at Tee Off Sports. And I'm excited about this week. I'm excited about the major next week. And hopefully we can keep the momentum rolling on this show.
Let's keep it rolling, fellas. You can also find me on Twitter at Roberto8213. You can find our best bets and all of our great golf content on actionnetwork.com and on the app. Just go over the golf tab. It's all there. Best bets are already live, and we've got a lot of great content this week. I know everybody loves Tyrrell Hatton among our panel of experts, so maybe consider him this week as well, or the in-tournament play for him. Thanks again to everyone who makes this podcast possible, especially our producers, Matt Mitchell and Noah Niederhofer, excuse me. Big thanks to Noah for always pulling us through the finish line and getting this published every week. So big thanks to him and for everyone at Action Network who supports us here on the Links and Locks tournament betting previews. This has been the Genesis Scottish Open betting preview. Thanks for tuning in, and here's to hoping you hit the green this week.